Welcome to This Endorian Life, a Star Wars podcast from the Radio Meanwhile Network. My name is Steve Rudd.
I'm Nick Gunning, and we're following the Ewoks from Return of the Jedi to the Ewok TV movies, the 80s cartoon, and the comics, and I guess now back to Return of the Jedi, right?
Yeah, this is where we started,
I know.
man. This is the OG, it's the beginning.
I know.
It's just, except different medium.
That's right.
Just a different
Full
medium,
circle,
that's all.
baby.
Yeah. So today, in honor of the film's 40th anniversary, in case you haven't noticed,
Right.
we are discussing Return of the Jedi, a novelization by James Kahn. The novel was originally released by Del Rey Publishing on May 12th, 1983.
Yeah. So
We were
this
wee boys.
not even, no, you weren't. You were nothing.
I was, oh yeah, you were
I
a
was.
wee boy.
Yeah, I was here, not you.
I was a wee fetus.
Yeah, that's you were a distant thought.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the book covers, because I checked mine out from my local library, and it was actually the original that the library would have purchased in 1983.
Okay.
And so it's the original, like the classic cover, but it's printed in a library binding, which is like where they take a paperback, put like basically a white spine on it, and then sort of print the cover over it. So it was kind of a cool little curio that mine was.
Okay.
And one interesting thing about that is Luke is on the cover with well, you don't actually see Luke, so maybe it's somebody else, but you see like hands holding a lightsaber, but it's blue, and Luke's in this is green, which I think your cover takes into account, right?
Yeah, so mine is the VHS cover. You know, Return of the Jedi with the green hue to everything behind the Emperor, Luke, and Vader and Yoda. With, I mean, if you look at this, it's like you realize how basic these covers were, but they're so iconic. Like the green.
Oh yeah,
I remember New Hope was like purple. Had that purple look to it. Empire Strikes Back had that like blue look to it.
That was like a
like
silvery
blue.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then this is the green. It's like so iconic. The VHS. That's all I can describe it as. Like that was the VHS cover. From way back in the day.
I know just what you mean.
The re-release, I guess, of it.
That's right. That's what it is. Yeah, because I had the VHS box set that it was like one was like half of Vader's face, one was half of Yoda's face, and I think the other one was like a stormtrooper, maybe, in like a box set. That's the one that I had. Anyway, this book, as we said, was written by James Kahn. So James Kahn is our featured creative today. He worked on several film novelizations from the 80s, including The Goonies, Temple of Doom, and both Poltergeist 1 and 2. He also worked as a television writer on shows like Xena Warrior Princess, Star Trek The Next Generation, and Voyager, plus Melrose Place, where he served as an executive producer. So shout out to Kendra over on 9021. Here we go.
That's awesome.
He has a website called thatjameskahn.com, which has a lot of interesting little factoids on it. You can also buy his current work and some of his older stuff, and he personalize it and signs it, all super reasonable prices. So the website's cool.
Very cool.
Before we dive into it, I want to tell you a little bit about what he said about the writing of Return of the Jedi. So this is directly from his website. I got the offer to write this one, I think, for two reasons. First, my World Enough in Time, which is an original series that he wrote, editor at Del Rey Books, Judy Lynn Del Rey, was also the editor for Return of the Jedi, and she recommended me for the gig. After that, Spielberg confirmed to Lucas what a nice job I'd done on Poltergeist. This was a dream job, he says, but also on a very tight schedule. I ended up writing it in 26 days, basing it on an early draft of the script and a lot of production stills. I wrote an entire new chapter about Leia's backstory on Alderaan, but George Lucas cut it. It wasn't his version of Leia's backstory, which he knew quite well, and I didn't. So the book cues very close to the film with some added dimension to the characters, which I did notice quite a bit of that.
Yeah.
And my own imaginary visuals, since I hadn't seen the movie. So he's writing this from an early script and just stills, and that's it.
Did we say he wrote it in 26 days?
26 days, yeah.
What?
Yeah.
That's insane. I mean, it's not super long, but it is 100. I mean, my version is 181 pages.
Yeah, mine's in that ballpark too. And I would say that it's pretty well written.
Yeah, it is really well written, man. I mean, I have to do this. I have to read the first two paragraphs of the prologue.
Okay.
Because I thought it was so good. So it starts, the prologue is, the very depths of space. There was the length and width and height. And then these dimensions curved over on themselves into a bending blackness measurable only by the glinting stars that tumbled through the chasm, receding to infinity, to the very depth. These stars marked the moments of the universe. There were aging orange embers, blue dwarfs, twin yellow giants. There were collapsing neutron stars and angry supernovae that hissed into the icy emptiness. There were burning stars, breathing stars, pulsing stars, and dying stars. There was the Death Star.
Yeah.
When I started, I was just like, "Yo, this is like already so it's like so good." We don't get a scroll, right? We don't get the
No, we don't get the crawl, but
we don't get the crawl. That's it. Yeah, sorry, but we got that, and I'm like, "Yo, okay, all right,
it's really strong."
Intense.
And
yeah.
So prior to this, the only thing that I read by him was the Goonies novelization. We did an episode on the Goonies. Over on But Have You Tried for the David A. Howe Public Library. So you can go listen to that wherever you get your podcasts.
Okay.
But the Goonies novelization is weird because it's written in first person as Sean Astin's character Mikey is like describing scenes and stuff. And so he's sort of writing like a 12-year-old would talk, and it just got really old really fast. So I was kind of like, oh, is this going to suck? But no, I thought this was really good. I thought there was a lot of places where he gave, I think particularly Han, but also Vader got some good stuff too, where you just got more insight of them kind of like thinking about
you got their inner thoughts.
Yeah.
And I think that was really cool. I'll bring that up later because I thought there was some really poignant scenes in the movie that were very intense with no talking. But here we got kind of like what was going on in their minds. And it's just like, whoa, it became more layered as opposed to what we were watching. So
I agree.
Yeah, they say what is a picture is 1,000 words, but like,
he proved it. I guess
2 seconds, 3 seconds. Yeah, it's like 2-3 seconds of like video footage of two people looking at each other with like 1,000 words, and it was just like, yo, this is wild.
No, it was definitely cool.
Oh man!
All right, why don't you read us the publisher's summary before we get too deep into this discussion?
I will. It was a dark time for the Rebel Alliance. Han Solo, frozen in carbonite, had been delivered into the hands of the vile gangster Jabba the Hutt. Determined to rescue him, Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, and Lando Calrissian launched a hazardous mission against Jabba's Tatooine stronghold. The Rebel commanders gathered all the warships of the Rebel fleet into a single giant armada, and Darth Vader and the Emperor, who had ordered construction to begin on a new and even more powerful Death Star, were making plans to crush the Rebel Alliance once and for all.
Return of the Jedi has always been my favorite of the original trilogy. Like from the first time I saw it, like up until now, and the most recent rewatch I did when I showed my son, it's just so good. And I think that reading this novel really drove that home because I love the segments that you get. You get this whole like espionage, clandestine thing.
Oh yeah.
With Jabba's palace, you see Luke showing up all hardcore. Like that's just like a great sequence.
Yeah.
And then we move to outside and Tatooine and, Boba Fett and the Sarlacc pit and that whole fight like on the surface. And then we move to Endor and the Ewoks. And like, I know there's beats in between, but those three like chunks, they're so different from each other. Like the tone feels so different. And you get like all three of these adventures in this really cohesive way. And the book just really brought that out to me about how cool that is to move through it. I love the structure of the movie.
What I realized from reading the book is that I thought the same thing you did. There are like 3 segments.
Yeah.
But the thing is, the first segment is just one thing going on.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's Jabba's palace, the whole thing. Then the second segment is 2 things. It's the Rebel Alliance and it's the Empire. Then the third segment, there's 3 things going on. There's Luke, Vader, and Emperor, that whole conflict. There's the Rebel fleet in space, and there's Endor. And reading it, I was like, oh yeah, they do such a good job in the movie of like flipping back and forth to these 3 things going on all at the same time, and it works.
Yeah.
And in the book, it works.
Yeah.
Like it just I was just like, oh yeah, I forgot how good that part of the movie is, where so much is happening, yet it all just is cohesive. It works. I think they flipped to the right things at the right time.
I do too.
They probably worked a long time on that. Like, okay, after this scene, where should we? After Leia and and Han are captured in the base. Like, do we flip to Luke or do we flip to the fleet?
Yeah.
What do we do? Where do we go? Kind of thing. I thought that was really good.
I agree. Having just read Donald Gluck's Empire Strikes Back novelization and just remembering the movie, the two movies are so different. And so naturally the two books are so different. But I think that The Empire Strikes Back obviously is the one that's somber, it's darker, it's not as adventure heavy as some of the others. And so to go from that into Return of the Jedi, and you make a great point, because it's not just the fact that we're building these different settings, but we're also like exponentially increasing the story.
Yes.
Each change, and you're right. By the end, you have so many things going on, and you're seeing not only the climax of this movie, but a climax of a saga, coming to a close. Like all three movies, the tease of Luke wanting to get off Tatooine, having this confrontation on Tatooine, rolling into this big confrontation with his father, which has been this overriding thing. It's just really well done. And like, I know that's not breaking any new ground to say the original Star Wars trilogy is good, but I just think if you just pull it back and just sort of look at it as like storytelling, as literature, and just think about all the building blocks that went into place to make Return of the Jedi such a satisfying climax. It's just really cool to see. And I think reading it in book form makes the point even more obvious.
Yeah. I mean, I thought there were aspects like, if we kind of like start at the beginning, right, and start working our way through.
Sure.
Like there's at the very beginning, Vader is dreaming of he has this like kind of plan of the Emperor being dead and ruling the galaxy with his son. So I always thought that was just kind of a ploy that Vader used to tempt Luke to join him.
Yeah.
Like, join me, we can rule the galaxy as father and son, to like try and lure him to the dark side. Yeah. But we find in the book, Vader's thoughts are actually killing the Emperor or ending the Emperor or Emperor being dead, whichever way you want to. To me, that almost kind of tarnished a little bit of like, he kind of was planning on the Emperor being dead, so that made a sacrifice of like, so he kind of got what he wanted at the end anyway. So I'm glad they didn't like add that in the movies. Yeah. Here's a funny thing about this. I went and looked halfway through. I was like, when was this book written? It was 1983, and I thought, wow, all this time, so many things are in this book.
Yeah, the novelizations are really interesting. Like all three of them have a lot to offer.
Yeah, Obi-Wan, like one of my things, Obi-Wan tells us of Anakin's death.
Yeah.
He tells us exactly how it happens.
I know. He's describing the scene from Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah, exactly.
Like he really is. He's talking about lava pits. He's talking about the fight. There's references to like Vader being so distraught over like his wife and all of this stuff that I was pretty surprised to see that really was like always kind of percolating in the background, because the Obi-Wan talking about the death really did stand out to me, because it kind of took me a minute to be like, wait a minute, this is what, like decades before that. So that was really,
I mean, there were a couple little mistakes. Like I made notes that like Lucas betrayed his own story with Anakin knowing Padme was pregnant, right?
Yeah.
So the original Vader did not know that Padme was pregnant.
That's what this novel is saying.
In 1983,
right. That's what the novel's saying.
But in the new movies, he knows.
Yeah.
Right? And I thought, well, that's interesting. Why would you... That's not like a small, nuanced mistake. That's like, okay, Vader didn't know to Vader knows.
Yeah. I think it goes from what Kahn was saying on his website there, that he was working from an early draft of the script. So I'm sure there was a point where that was going to be true, because they also, I think at one point say that they don't call her by name, but I think they say that Padme died when Leia and Luke were 4, which was another thing.
Yes. Yeah, because Leia remembered things like, oh, I was in a crate. My mother was very beautiful.
Yes.
And I think that that's better. And actually, I did note that Ben admits that if Senator Organa was in trouble, to contact him, setting up the show, Kenobi.
Yeah.
Right? So that was in there.
Yeah.
And it's in the book, 1983.
Yeah.
Hey, if you're ever in trouble, reach out to me.
Yeah.
And so
I know that was a neat moment.
I thought that was really cool, of like, oh man, 40 years later and it happened. I think the way that James Kahn wrote it makes more sense. I mean, just think of Luke not knowing he's had a sister.
Yeah.
And how that affected him. Leia's reaction of, oh, you know what? Somehow I've always known.
Yeah.
And Vader feeling this feeling of, wait, you're my kid.
Yeah.
You've got to be my kid, right?
Yep.
And then knowing just kind of sets that like triumvirate of like three people realizing that they're all related and without actually having any proof.
Yeah.
Right? There's no proof. It's just, Ben being like, oh, he's your father, and so, and he's lied for all this time. So it's like, I don't know. I thought that was really interesting that I think that's a better story. That I don't know why they did that in episode 3,
I mean,
but
that kind of rolls into one of the I think the biggest differences here is the reveal about the relationship between Obi-Wan and Owen Lars.
Yeah, it says Owen's his brother.
Yeah,
Owen is Ben's brother.
Yeah,
and I was like, whoops.
Yeah, that Obi-Wan goes to hide Luke with his own brother on Tatooine. And
I think that would have been better.
It is cool. Yeah.
It's cool that but like I guess Owen was supposed to be Ben's brother, not Luke's uncle.
Yeah,
not Luke. No.
Well, yeah.
What is it? He's his half brother or something, right? I don't know.
It's Anakin's stepbrother is what Owen is, his stepbrother. So Luke's like step uncle. Yeah. But I think, that doesn't really gel with the whole concept of like Jedi are taken, when they're kids into training and they don't have family connections and stuff. So to have, Obi-Wan have this brother, it doesn't really work. But I think narratively it does.
Yes.
If you just set aside that concept about the Jedi, which you don't learn until later. I think is from this story, it's kind of cool to have that be Obi-Wan's brother. But that I think is the biggest like what moment in here.
Yeah, to me that was like that's way better because like
yeah.
I don't know, my kid's missing. The first person I'm going to call is like my brother-in-law that lives down the street.
It is strange. Like it's always seemed odd to me that they're like, okay, we have to hide these kids from Vader, so let's take him to Vader's only known connection. Let's take the kid there. Is weird. That's weird.
Yeah.
Were there other things that popped out to you here?
Yeah, I mean, I thought there was some fun things, like we get a snippet of Tanab, the Battle of Tanab, how Lando got to be general.
Yeah.
And I thought it was very fun that it all, like, they just give it a little snippet of it, and it was all on a bet. Like, he did this whole thing, and it was all because of a bet. And I thought, how Lando is that? To, like, tell this, like, 1.5 paragraph story about how, something he did, some heroic thing he did, and it was because of a bet.
Right.
I just thought that was really
right.
good.
But that's some of the nice flavor that's in there. Like there's, like I mentioned, I think that Han gets a lot of cool stuff as well, where he's just like a little bit more contemplative about like what his role in it and what he's supposed to do and everything. There's just some interesting things. Yeah, he is. Yep.
Yeah. Way more. And there was that whole thing of when Han is trying to let go of the Falcon to Lando, and it's like, I got not a scratch, right? And Lando in the book does this quip about putting security, but you want me to put a security deposit down on it? Which I thought was funny, but then all of a sudden in my mind it immediately made it no longer sci-fi, made it like, that's like a normal day-to-day something that we would hear, right?
True.
Almost like
True.
What do they call it? Breaking the wall, where it's like, oh crap, like you made it like no longer this spacey saga in my head. I was like, oh crap, it's real, security deposit. But I thought that was funny that like that's something Lando would be like, you want me to put a security deposit? I'll do it, you know what?
Yeah.
Oh, one thing that I thought was I don't know if this is just the way that James Kahn wrote it, but when Luke is talking to Yoda for the last time, Yoda says he fears for Luke, which jumped out to me immediately because Yoda is the one that says fear is the path to the dark side. Saying like, oh, like I fear for you. I thought, well, that's odd. I mean, of course, there's other things that the Jedi say. Like, what's the famous line of
only a Sith
deals in absolutes?
Yeah, which is an absolute in itself. So that's
I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that like, but I just thought that kind of jumped out to me, and I was just like, oh, he said he fears for him. So I get why that was like taken out of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of quirky things like Jabba talks about how many Jedi he's killed and stuff, which also doesn't really gel with like a later understanding of the Jedi.
That was very interesting. Yeah, he says, I'm not affected by your human thought pattern. Then as an afterthought, he quotes, I was killing your kind when being a Jedi meant something. And I was like, I
Yeah.
was like, what? I was like,
I know.
like, let's back that up
I wanna
and
read
read
that
that back
story.
again. Yeah, so, like,
I
apparently
know.
that was
I know.
that was a significant aspect of, I guess, of Jabba that, was
Yeah.
never made known in the movie, so that's pretty big.
Yeah.
Hey, let's bring it to the Ewoks now.
Let's do it.
Dude, Return of the Jedi Teebo is way different,
Yeah.
right? And we kinda knew this,
Oh
right?
my
'Cause
gosh.
Teebo in the show
Yeah.
is, like, orange with a purple dress.
Yeah. And he's usually the comic foil,
Comic
he's usually,
foil.
like, messing up spells and things.
Where in this, he's light and dark gray. He's kinda like lion almost.
Yep.
He's
Yep.
got a horned animal skull. He's larger. He walked,
Mhm.
and I love this. He walked with swagger.
Does it say that? Does it say
It
swagger?
does.
Wow.
It says he walked with swagger, which I was like, "Yo, all right."
Yeah. Tebow. I did notice at one point when he's, like, giving a lot of orders and stuff, they call
Mhm.
Wicket and Paplu Tebow's chief scouts.
Yes, they do. Wicket is way more mature,
Yeah.
right? I mean, later on, we get the scene where C-3PO tells the story, tells that kind of animated story
Yeah.
of the rebellion and stuff like that. And then in the movie, when he's done, the elders kind of chat with each other and they're like, "You're now part of the tribe."
Yeah.
Where in this, they're like kind of not convinced. They were like, "That's not really
Yeah.
a great story because it doesn't involve Ewoks," which
Right.
I thought was a very Ewok
Mhm.
thing to say. Like, your story's great and all, but it's really not
Yeah,
that
what does
great.
that have to do
Use
with
a little
this?
more Ewok in it.
Yeah.
Because then Leia comes in and she gives her spiel, and she says, "Do it for the trees,"
Yeah.
right?
Well, Han is saying, like, "Look, the Empire's gonna drain all your resources," and Luke is saying, "They're gonna kill the stars. Like, they're gonna kill the stars
Yep.
if you don't do this." And then Wicket, kind of brings it home with his speech. So yeah, interesting that, like, they had to work a little harder to get the Ewoks to fight with them. I like that.
Yep.
I thought that
I
was a
thought
cool
that was
bit.
really cool.
Yeah.
And the Ewoks had a genuine acceptance of the concept of the Force, right?
Yeah.
They call it not the Force.
Mhm.
It's said in the book, and I thought that was really interesting that, like, they were like, "Oh, okay, yeah, we know what you're talking about. We
Yeah.
just call it something else."
Which is
And it was
something
just like,
that we've
"Whoa,
covered in the
all right."
cartoon a lot because we've seen
Yeah,
force
like
sensitive Ewoks and stuff kinda using it for that.
Yep.
But, there was an interesting little tidbit about Luke's lightsaber too, where he
Mhm.
talks about going to Obi-Wan's old hut on Tatooine and constructing a new lightsaber, which is kind of a cool backstory. I liked
Yeah.
that.
I remember you said that, like, you had started the book and it was things jumped out at
Yeah.
you, that were different right away. So at the beginning of the book, we get a scene where Luke is in that hut, right?
Yeah.
He's kinda, like, completing the saber and putting it inside R2-D2. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't think he says it, but, like, he's with R2, and
Yeah.
then R2 leaves, like, a cavern or a little
Mhm.
hut or something. So there is a deleted scene,
Oh.
fully filmed, sounded, and everything, that is that scene
Oh,
of
okay.
Luke
That's cool. I didn't know that.
constructing his lightsaber and, like, sliding it back together, activating it, and turning it off, and then you cut to C-3PO outside, and then R2-D2 rolls out, and
Mhm.
he's like, "All right, let's go." And they start on their way to Jabba's
Yeah.
palace. So in the book, I thought, "Oh, I bet Nick thinks that this is jumped out immediately because
Yeah, I did.
the very first, instead of going right to the droids, it's Luke. We see
Yeah.
Luke."
That's interesting, but I do feel like the movie made the right choice there because
Yes.
saving Luke's reveal of him just showing up and, like, being cool and hardcore, I think is much better than seeing him sort of, like, work out a plan. I
Exactly.
like the movie version better, but it was cool to read the scene.
Yeah.
That's cool. I didn't realize it had a direct correlation like that.
Yeah, there's a fun aspect of it. It's funny, so there's a line in here. It says, "Flattened down in the bushes on the ridge with the strike force were several Ewoks, including Wicket, Paplu, Tebow, and Warwick."
Yeah.
And I wrote, "Did they mean Warwick?" Because Warwick is Wicket's last name.
Yeah.
Wicket W. Warwick. So
Yeah.
Warwick, I looked it up. Warwick is, I couldn't find it as a Ewok.
I wondered the same thing if that was just a shout out to Warwick Davis.
I think so. I think that's fairly clever, and yeah, we get Warwick acknowledged.
Yeah. Don't we get a little thing about how Endor, the planet, was destroyed and all we have is the moon left? Wasn't there a little throwaway thing about that?
Oh, yes. Yeah, it was consumed. It did get destroyed.
Yeah.
It was destroyed.
Yeah.
Yep,
And
yep.
is
Do
that
it
a thing
now.
that we've known before, or was that original to this? That I had never heard that.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I did too.
Why did its host planet have to be destroyed? Like,
Yeah, I
why?
don't think they really. Yeah, I don't think it really gave much context for that. Just sort of like adding some flavor, I guess. But
Yeah, I guess
interesting
so. Yeah.
nonetheless.
I have two last things.
Okay.
So I thought one thing that was really interesting, right? In the movie, Luke is tempted by the dark side multiple times. In the book, we get a glimpse of the progression of his temptation. He says he's standing there and like he sees something, like he's seeing visions of himself and his father and things like that. And like we don't get that in the movie.
True.
They're like, "You're gonna come to the dark side," and he's like, "No, I'm not." And they're like, "Oh yeah, you will." And he's like, "Well, I guess I'll just be destroyed. You're just gonna have to destroy me." But like in the book, it's like in his head as he's saying these things, he's being tempted.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really, really cool.
Yeah, it
and
was.
then of course, another big difference was at the end. In the movie, we see the ghosts of Anakin, Yoda, and Obi-Wan. And in the book, he sees them in the flames of the fires of the celebration in the Ewok village, which I thought was cool, but I think the movie is better when we see their Force ghosts. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
It's a great end.
Yeah, and that kind of, I don't know, that sort of gels with the way that Obi-Wan, he's sort of experienced Obi-Wan in Empire Strikes Back and everything. I feel like seeing the Force ghosts makes a little bit more sense in that regard. But it was a neat, the thought there, the image is a cool one, of them coming out of the fire that way. But
yeah, great book. I thought he did a great job.
I mean, too. Yeah,
I read this in like 3 sittings.
I've enjoyed all 3 of the original novelizations. The first one, of course, by Alan Dean Foster. The second one, Donald Glut, and here James Kahn. The sequel trilogy, which I've also read, those don't give you the kind of stuff that we're talking about. They're much tighter to the original. Although The Last Jedi does have a pretty extended bit with sort of like a fantasy life for Luke about, it imagines Luke with a wife and everything. So there's some interesting things there. But I feel like these novelizations, when they're pulling like James Kahn was from these earlier versions of the scripts and sort of piecing it together from what they know, looking at stills, having seen the first couple of movies, having the words on the paper, kind of forces the author to fill in those blanks that, a facial expression will give you that in a movie, but he's got to kind of give you a motivation for like what's going on to show that through either dialogue or internal monologue or whatever. And I think from that, you get some of these little morsels of information that you can kind of think about.
Well, yeah, they're not sitting there stoic and mindless.
Yeah.
They're thinking of things, and they are being tempted. They might not show it, but they are.
Yeah.
That's cool. There were a couple other deleted scenes from the movie that were actually in the book, which I thought was really funny.
Yeah.
One scene, I guess that makes sense to the whole like Vader hating the Emperor, there was a scene cut from the movie where Jerjerrod, he's the guy at the very beginning, the Imperial officer that is overseeing the construction of the battle station.
Okay, all right.
We shall double our efforts, that guy.
Yeah.
He holds power over Vader in a scene where when Vader realizes that, in the book, when Vader realizes that Luke is on that shuttle, he leaves the Super Star Destroyer to go to the Death Star to see the Emperor, but the Emperor is like seeing people. So this scene that's cut out is Vader wants to get into the elevator to see the Emperor, and Jerjerrod says, "No, you can't." And Vader kind of like comes at him threatening, and the Imperial guards like hold out their staffs to stop him, and he's like, "See, ha!" And so there's like that scene where like Vader's like, "All right, fine, I'll come back later."
Yeah.
That was cut out, but it was in the book.
Yeah.
So I thought that was great. But like that's another thing. There's this conflict that Vader is having, even though it may not be like the conflict we think where like he's going to. Oh, maybe he's questioning his darkness.
Yeah.
He's like, no, he's questioning. I want to go deeper into darkness, killing my emperor, and like bringing my son in to rule the galaxy. But like, I thought that was great to kind of read through and see their both of their conflicts. So, yeah,
I do think the stuff that it adds, just character bits, really do kind of help the characters, help your understanding of the characters, And I think not every novelization would really function as a novel, but I sort of feel like these original 3, and it's particularly this one, I sort of feel like this may be the best of the 3. of the original novelizations. I think that if the movies didn't exist and somebody just picked up these 3 novelizations, it would be a really satisfying sort of fantasy series,
Yeah.
you know?
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's really
There's so
cool.
much going on. It's
Yeah.
almost, yeah, I think it could have done with 50 extra pages because like the last 3 chapters, I felt like were almost rushed a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that.
I wanted to see the description of the space battles a little bit more than just kind of like the jargon across the communications, like red one, standing by, red five, and then like they segmented it with like people replying to each other, and it was almost chaotic at one point because it was like he did a good job of that where it was just like everyone like there's one on my tail, help, I'm over here, like I got him, and I'm going in, and like it was just like a bunch of people replying all in a line, and you didn't know who it was, but you wouldn't, right? Because it was so chaotic. So I thought that was really cool. But I wanted like more of like how that happened, and it almost seemed very rushed to get like the story of Vader and Emperor and Luke and the Forest Moon. And that kind of took the forefront, where in the movie, there was a lot going on with the space battle.
Yeah. Well, I think, too, I mean, obviously we're primed to look at Ewok things. I felt like the Ewok portion was really short. Like,
very short.
That scene in the movie, where you have the gliders, of course, and like the trees swinging together and knocking things out. I don't know that like the Ewok hijinks really would have worked so well in a novel form, but it does kind of feel like we skipped over that a little bit, which I didn't love. So I'm kind of with you on I could have used another 50 pages, but also I think the brevity, like how quickly it moves, there's no fat on this at all. You're just like zooming right through it. I also think that kind of adds to the experience too. So I'm okay with it as it is, even though your points are valid.
I'm curious as to this extra chapter on Leia.
I know. I would love
I'm very curious.
That.
Like, where would that have been?
I wondered
would
that
it
too.
Have been her experience when she's on Endor?
Yeah.
Or like, I'm curious because, like, man, we're never gonna see that unless James Kahn, you're listening.
Yeah, and you wanna just slip it to us. We'll never tell. Yeah.
Never tell. But like, I really want to know what that's about, because it's funny you mentioned that like the novelization of the sequels has like something about Luke being married or something. Would you say something like that?
The Last Jedi novelization was written by Jason Fry, who I interviewed over on How's Things. So if anybody wants to hear this conversation, and I also interviewed Alan Dean Foster, and we talked about the novelizations as well. But
I am jealous of that. Yeah.
It starts with Luke just living this very normal life where he's like living on this planet. He has a wife and he has kids, and you're sort of seeing like old man Luke Skywalker happy, and then you kind of jump to this solitary, sad, grumpy Luke Skywalker, on this little like island with frog ladies serving him. And it's
what they are, the caretakers.
Yeah. And it's just sort of it's almost like a dream sequence, and it's kind of cool to see that, because you sort of see some wistfulness in Luke that you don't really get in the movie. So yeah.
It's funny because I saw an interview with him shortly after
Hamill.
Mark
Hamill. Okay,
sorry, Mark Hamill. He had a creepy like needle mustache.
Ooh.
It was very funny.
Yowzer.
And the guy, whoever it was, asked him, "Would you ever play Luke again?" And he said, "No, I wouldn't like to play Luke ever again." And this was years ago, so this probably was 38 years ago in that realm, 39 years ago. And he said, no, I don't want to play Luke again. Not unless he has a girlfriend or something. And, he kind of talks about that briefly. And I was just like, so you mentioning like, oh, he has a family. It's just like, he said it in an interview, that he didn't want to play Luke ever again unless he had a girlfriend. They never gave him a girlfriend in the movies, but in the books he does.
Yeah.
Or he has a wife. Is it Mara Jade? Was that her name?
Mara Jade is in the expanded universe, but this wasn't Mara Jade in the Jason Fry novel. It was different, but
okay.
Yeah, I've read most of the novelizations at this point. I haven't read Solo, and I haven't read Attack of the Clones or Phantom Menace, but I've read the rest of them. So I got to go and do it.
Solo novelization.
I know. Yeah, I'd like to read that.
You got to read it. You can read it. You read it for me.
I'll read it and I'll let you know.
Yeah.
Yep.
You let me know. Yeah.
How many yub nubs do you get this novelization?
Man, I I don't read many books.
Okay.
But this one really, like, I burned through this one. It was good. I don't know. I'd give it like a 4.5.
Okay.
I really enjoyed it. I'm not going to give it a 5 because James Kahn didn't add the portion about
the Leia chapter.
Yeah, that's why.
Yeah. I think I would give it a 4. I think, I've read better novelizations. I've read novelizations that I felt like we had some extended scenes. We had a little bit more inner monologue, but I think there was a little bit more that could be done for character moments and stuff. So, that's a mild criticism because I really did like it. And what he gave us, I did like, but I'm going to say 4 for that reason. But I've enjoyed these novelizations.
It's good.
For sure. Well, happy 40th anniversary, Return of the Jedi. The Ewoks and I celebrate our 40th year together, as do you.
Yeah, I do at the end of the year, towards the end. And, oh, man, how cool was it to sit there and read through the Return of the Jedi and just feel like, man, this is how we started.
Yep.
Let's start out with the Return of the Jedi, you said.
Yeah, I did.
And I said, okay, let's do it.
Yep. And here we are.
I was almost tempted to watch it again, but I was like, no. If I watch it, then I'm going to get something mixed up with the book in the movie.
You definitely will. You definitely will. Well, if watching something is what you want to do, Steve, because I know for the last 3 episodes, this has become a book podcast. If you want to watch something, next episode, we're diving into the other half of the Ewoks and Droids Adventure Hour with Droids. Episode 1, The White Witch.
Ooh, man, I'm excited. Oh, man.
I have not seen this show decades. Yeah. And I've never seen the whole thing. I've seen one of the compilations. I feel like it's The Great Heap, maybe, that I've seen a bunch of times. I don't know, but I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait to watch it.
I can't remember if I've watched it. I don't think so. I haven't watched it yet, so I'm like waiting to get into it before the episode. Like I didn't want to watch it like when we started this whole thing or when it was released. I kind of held off because like, okay, we're gonna get to the droids, so I'm just gonna get to it when I get to it.
Yep.
But seeing a couple of the little icons, like
like on Disney Plus, the little
little reveal icons for each episode. There were 2 that I was like, oh, I think I may have seen this before.
All right.
And I just thought maybe it was, as a kid, like, did I make that up? I don't know.
I guess we'll find out.
I don't know.
Yes. Yeah, so for the next stage of the podcast, we're going to be watching an episode of Droids and then covering an issue of the Ewoks comic, alternating, moving through this whole era of Star Wars vintage.
Yes, so we'll give you a snippet of the Ewoks so you don't feel so...
That's right, because we could never leave them behind.
Well, no, we can't. We can't.
All right.
And then we don't want to riot on our hands when people sign in to hear the next Ewok thing.
Of course not.
Ewoks.
Of course not. Yeah. All right, well, I'll see you next time for Droids.
Yeah, absolutely. See you then. This Endorian Life was brought to you by the Radio Meanwhile Network. Other shows on the network include Previously on X-Men, 90s Music Got Me Like, and 9021 Here We Go! Share your thoughts on this and upcoming episodes by following us on Facebook or Twitter at Endorian Life, and please rate, subscribe, and share the show wherever you get your podcasts.
Boom.
Boom.